No. No. Good morning, everyone. Please let me know if you can hear me well. First, thank you for joining us again on this third Facebook Live on the 3rd District Spelling Bee. So please let us know about the schools you belong to, and also the institutions, your names, if you're a student, a teacher. So please, below this video in the comments, let us know about your schools, your names, and if you're student, teachers, or if you belong to any other institutions. All right. Well, we have Mafe Montilla, Hector Castillo, Maria Gomez, good morning, Angelica Moreno, Victoria Rincon. Thank you very much for joining us. Okay, we also have Hu Pacheco, Olga Maria Guzman Bernal from Antonio Van Uden School, Mayra Liliana Barrera from Provincia de Quebec. Thanks for joining us. We also have Leila Jolima Escobar. We have Manu Alejo Jesus, the teacher from Fanny Mickey School. Jenny Elizabeth Rodriguez, thank you for joining us. Don't forget to give us a like. And also, before we start, remember that Red Academica has also a Twitter account. So don't forget to, if you have a Twitter account, please join us on Twitter as well. Most of the material that is shared here on Facebook is also shared in the Twitter. So please let us know if you have Twitter and start following us on this social media network. All right. Okay, we have Marta from Colegio Prado Veraniego. Good morning, Marta. República Dominicana, Sandy. Good morning. Thank you for joining us. From Cundinamarca School, Juliet Laverde. Okay, Ruby from Ofelia Uribe. Okay, we have Giselle from La Belleza, Los Libertadores. Doris from Nicolás Esquerra School. Good morning. My father studied in that school, Nicolás Esquerra. All right. Eduardo Maña Mendoza, Johanna, good morning. Thank you for joining us today. We also have teacher Norma that is going to be with us today. Maria Alejandra from Usme School. Thank you for joining us. We also have Marruecos y Molinos. Thank you for joining us. I used to be a gestor pedagógico in that school, so welcome. And Leonardo Posada Pedraza. So we have Judy. All right, we have many other people joining. So thank you for being with us today again on behalf of the Secretary of Education and the Science, Technology and Media Department at the Secretary of Education and the Plan Distrital de Segunda Lengua, Red Academica as well. We want to welcome you all to this third Facebook Live. Thank you for being with us today, and remember that, well, this has been like a series of workshops that we have been carrying out as part of the strategy Aprende en Casa or Learn at Home. Remember that this strategy is like what we are, or the Secretary of Education is implementing due to the emergency or the health emergency that we're facing. So we wanted to integrate, for those who are new on this Facebook Live, remember that, well, the purpose or the main objective of these workshops is to share with you different activities and different strategies that can be implemented with the word lists, with the rules, with all the information on the documents that you will find on Red Académica. So remember that all this material can be found in Red Académica. Everything related to the third district spelling bee, including the convocatoria, like all the word lists, listas de vocabulario for the three categories. Remember that we have primary, we have high school A and high school B categories. And well, today we will start talking about learning vocabulary and expressions in English. All right. Remember that last session we started talking about how to practice pronunciation, the importance of practicing pronunciation when learning vocabulary, when using the word lists, and when teaching and learning English. All right. Today we're going to focus on the way or different strategies and different activities that can be implemented when learning vocabulary and expressions in English. Why vocabulary and expressions in English? Remember that for this third district spelling bee, we have included different expressions that are used in common communicative contexts in English. And well, basically, we wanted to include this to make the learning of this vocabulary and these expressions more communicative, so that students don't feel that they are learning isolated words, but they are like learning expressions that can be used in a daily environment or in a daily situation. All right. So to start, we're gonna start with a quiz, right? So you have some questions here, and these questions are about the last session that we had. So we're gonna have like an assessment, and this is a strategy that you can use with your students as well, right? Sometimes we teach our lesson and then we start a new one without assessing what our students learned in the previous classes, right? So we're gonna have an assessment, and that and for those who participated in the previous Facebook Live, we have these questions for you. Please let me know if you can see the PowerPoint presentation. Let me. Are you seeing the PowerPoint presentation? Okay. So these are the questions that we have for you to assess what we learned in our previous Facebook Live. The first question is, what pronunciation activities can be implemented to practice pronunciation? So remember that last class we started talking about, or last session we started talking about different activities or different strategies that could be implemented. So please, on the comments below, start sharing with us or let us know what you remember about those activities. All right. So write what type of activities, or if you have any other type of activities that you have implemented in your lessons as well. Second question: how can we integrate the third district spelling bee word lists to practice pronunciation? So remember that these sessions are for you to integrate the word lists, the material that you find for the third district spelling bee in the lessons that you're giving to your students. All right. So how can we integrate them? How can we integrate the word lists to practice pronunciation? All right. And finally, we have true or false and why. So here you have a statement. You're gonna let us know if this statement is true or false based on what we learned in the previous session, and you're gonna tell us why. All right. So the statement goes like this: the goal of teaching pronunciation is to enable the students to become not perfect pronouncers of English. Is that statement true or false based on what we learned in the previous session? All right. So please let us know about your answers. So here we have Hector Castillo that is saying that I think this is for the first question. Drilling seems to be one of the most used strategies by English teachers. That's true. This is something that we mentioned in the last session. Drilling is something that most teachers use. And it doesn't mean that that is like bad, because drilling is effective if used in the proper way. But remember that drilling can be also used in different ways, no? For example, remember that we used minimal pairs. For example, Jamil is telling us that use phonetics exercises, for example, minimal pairs. That's something that we can also teach our students to identify minimal differences in the pronunciation of very similar words. We also used, remember that we also used tongue twisters, right? So this is like another strategy. Uh, Teacher Liliana Chinchilla is telling us like students can create stories with word lists. Also, students can create tongue twisters, and students can use TikTok application. So this is something that we also implemented in the previous session. No, we were seeing the way that TikTok or videos or visual aids can be used as part of this health emergency, and also the way that we can implement, for example, stories. We can create or we can use a vocabulary from the word lists, and then students can create stories, can create poems, can create like maybe an audio book. Maybe they can like read the story on an audio, and they can practice pronunciation in that way. All right. So what about the second question? So we say, how can we integrate? So as teacher Liliana was saying, tongue twisters based on words that have similar sounds in the word lists. If you're teaching on a specific sound, and using visual aids and technology resources also is telling us Liliana Nino. So we can also use the word lists, and then our students can create these TikTok videos or these stories as well. All right. How about the last question? Sandy's saying use dictionaries. That is also a good strategy. Remember that now we have online dictionaries where students can click, and they will find the pronunciation or with different accents, British accent, American accent. Some dictionaries bring other different accents from other countries or from different regions within English speaking countries, right? So this is like, that is another strategy. Maida says, in some of my lessons, I tried students create a kind of coplas using vocabulary we had worked on. That is a really nice strategy. So that students create short songs that rhyme, and you can use like the words that we have in the vocabulary lists. All right. So the last question, true or false. So it says the goal of teaching pronunciation is to enable students to become not perfect pronouncers of English. So this statement is true, right? So remember that the main purpose of teaching pronunciation or learning pronunciation is not to become perfect pronouncers of English, or that we become native speakers. The main purpose is that students produce sounds that can be understood in an easy way, right? The main purpose is that students can accomplish the communication objective, that they can transmit their messages in a proper way, and the most important, that they can be understood and that they can understand what people are telling them, right? So remember that is the main purpose of communication. We don't need to speak like native speakers to say that we have a good level of English. What we have to do is to produce the sounds in an intelligible way, and in a way in which we can be understood and understand other people. All right? So this is like something that you can do with your students every time that you have a lesson and then you start a new one. What about having an assessment of what you taught them in the previous one? All right, with some questions that can help them like analyze information, remember things, check their notes. And this is going to be a good way to start your new lesson, remembering what was learned in the previous one. All right, good. So, people, to start today, we have video uh, that shows the history of the English language. We're not going to play the video right now because, well, the video lasts 10 minutes, but we're going to share the video with you at the end of this session, and also on the material and the bank of resources that we have created for you. And remember that you find this on the Red Academica website. And basically, we wanted to share this video about the history of English in 10 minutes, because sometimes we teach English, but we don't let our students know. We as teachers know the history of English, but we don't let them know about how this language originated, and how or how English evolution throughout the years made it one of the most spoken languages, and in many different environments. And well, it's important that students realize about how other languages influenced English, and how everyday vocabulary is being created, or new vocabulary is being created, how new words are included in dictionaries based on the use, based on the technology, based on like different aspects that influence the English language. This happens in all the languages, right? In Spanish it happens as well. We create new words, we take words from other languages, and then we start implementing it or using it in our native language. So the same happened to English, right? So it's important that you sometimes or once in a while let your students know about this evolution of English, all right, and why it became one of the most spoken languages nowadays. All right, so we're going to share with you this later, but for now we're going to talk about fun facts about the English language. All right, so this is something that can be shared with your students as well. Remember that we have to motivate our students to learn English, and sometimes motivation is not only telling them like, oh, you have to learn English because it's important for your life, because you're going to need it at the university, or you're going to get a better job, but they need to know the importance, or to learn about the importance of English because there are many, many different things that explain why this became one of the most spoken languages in the world. So here we have some. Over 840 million people speak English as a first or second language. So as I was telling you before, this is one of or like the second most spoken language in the world, and we have that this is like the first and the second language for over 840 million people, right? So 1/4 of the world's population speaks at least some English. So 1/4 of the world's population knows at least some words in English, uses English at least in some situations in their lives. All right. Shakespeare invented many words such as birthplace, blushing, undress, torture, and many more. So this is another important aspect. No, sometimes we're teaching English to our students, but they don't know who Shakespeare was or why Shakespeare was so important for English language. And in his plays, in his writings, uh, he created new words. He named different feelings, different things that were didn't exist, or these words didn't exist before. So the same happened in Spanish, no, with Don Quixote. So this is something that you can use to motivate your students. No, why not using plays, like for example Shakespeare's or others? But this is like a way in which English language evolved throughout history. We have, for example, that most English words come from French or Old English, right? It's like why French and old? What is Old English? So this is something that you can start explaining to your students as well. So remember that Great or Britain was an isle, and it was invaded by the Normans, and then they brought the English. They were invaded by the Romans at the beginning, so they had Latin words as well. And then you have like the Germanic tribes that invaded the island or the isles, and then Old English was created. No, with the mix of all these Germanic languages. So this is also something that you can start sharing with your students. No, the history of English. Some of our students like history, so why not sharing this part of history with them as well? The word LOL or LOL was added to the Oxford English Dictionary in 2011. So LOL, what I'm sure that you have seen this word, and this is like what does it mean? It's like laughing out loud, no? And this is like used in text messages or sometimes in emails or in social media, and then we say like sometimes we see these words, and then we don't know what they mean, no, but they have a specific meaning. It's like when something is really funny, and then you want to say that it costs like a lot of laugh on you, so then you can say laughing out loud, right? And there are many others. For example, when we're sending emails, we use the FYI, that is for your information, right? And then these words started being included in the as part of the Oxford English Dictionary, for example, in 2011, or in other dictionaries as well. So, for example, the word "set" has the highest number of definitions, right? So this word has many other or many definitions. Uh, in this case, the highest number of definitions in the English language. And sometimes this is something that students need to know, that one word in English can have many different meanings. And for example, this one can be like used in one of your classes to teach them how words in English can have different functions or can have different meanings depending on the context and the position in the sentence that they are being used. All right. For example, did you know that the original name for butterfly was flutterby? So this is like the way that English has changed, or some words changed throughout history, no? So flutterby became butterfly. The word goodbye originally comes from an old English phrase meaning God be with you. So this is like translated into Spanish is like que vaya con Dios or que Dios esté con usted, right? And then after the years, it became goodbye. And then this is something that could interest your students, like knowing how or the magic of words, know how they change, how they represent culture and religion sometimes. Uh, and we don't know these facts. All right, over 80% of the information stored on computers worldwide is in English. So this is another important information that could be shared with your students, or that if we have some students following us today, well, most of the information that we stored in our computers is in English. The softwares that we use, uh, the settings of our cell phones, most of the information that we have or that is used in technology these days is in English. And that's why English is also very, very commonly used in technology environments. All right. Another important fact, the British Empire, because people say like, why people speak English in so many places? So remember that the British Empire, or when the British conquest started, they we have, for example, India or Australia or different places in different parts of the world that expanded the use of English, or had English are the official language spoken in those places, right? So this is another piece of history that you could also start telling your students. We also have, for example, as I was telling you before, the iPhone or the Androids that are like some of the biggest reasons why English is so widespread today. So finally, English is the official language of the air, meaning like the airplane travel. So if you travel by plane, or the pilots, they have to use English if they want to communicate with the airports, or if they want to communicate with other pilots. Uh, Also, English is the most spoken language in business. No, so remember that if you have, for example, Japanese people having business with Russians and with people from Spain, what's the common language that they are going to use? They are going to communicate through English. No, so this is like the same for tourism industry. If you travel to, let's say, Hawaii, or you travel to Japan, and then you're staying at a hotel, and you don't know Japanese, what's the language that people are going to use? Japanese people are not going to speak to you in Japanese, because they know that this is going to be like kind of tough for you to understand, but they will use English. All right. If you work at a hotel here in Colombia, and then an English native person speaks to you, the person will try to speak in Spanish. No, maybe this person knows some words, but what is going to be the best way to communicate with that person? English, right? So this is like some fun facts. These are some fun facts that you could start sharing with your students every time that you start a new lesson. Why not, for example, using a fun fact as an introduction for your lesson? Yes, something that motivates students. What about using a quote in English? Yes, so that the student related to the topic that you will introduce. So this is something that can be also motivating for your students. All right. So that being said, we're going to start moving on the strategies that you can implement as part of the teaching vocabulary practice in your lessons. All right. Why is it so important to teach vocabulary to your students? Remember, no vocabulary, no communication. Yes, if you don't know words, if you don't know a high amount of words, then communication is going to be impossible. And remember, well, sometimes we are very, very focused on teaching structures and knowing how to create questions, how to create negative sentences, how to create affirmative sentences, and yes, this is important. No, the structure that you use when created a sentence is very important so that the other person understands. But what if I know the structure, but then when I'm going to create a new sentence, I don't know the words that I need to use to communicate, or when someone is telling me something, then you say, well, I can understand what this person is saying, but I'm not able to understand the words this person is using, right? So this is like another way in which we can realize about the importance of learning vocabulary. That if we don't know words, for example, you say, no, I like music in English, and then you listen to a song but you don't understand 80 or 90% of the words that are being used in this song. So you like the song but you don't know what the song says or what the song means. All right, so it's important to realize and to give more relevance to the vocabulary teaching in our lessons and learning to be more, or to improve our skills. And this is because vocabulary influences all the other skills, right? Here we have a cartoon that says, according to this poll, when asked if there was sufficient English as a second language instruction in their school district, 35% of ESL students said yes. 65% didn't understand the question, right? And this is an example of what happens, for instance, when students are reading a text, when taking the Prueba Saber exam, or when they are, you bring a reading exercise or you bring a listening exercise, or they have to write and they say like, no, I cannot do this. Why? Because, well, you don't know vocabulary. If you don't know vocabulary, it's going to be very difficult to write a text. It's going to be very difficult to understand to a listening exercise. It's going to be very difficult to speak if you don't know vocabulary. And when it comes to reading, it's very curious that most of the students, when being asked or to assess their performance in these different skills, most Colombians, or it has happened to me, I guess it has happened to you as well. They say like, no, teacher, I can read English. I can read English, but I cannot speak. I cannot understand when I'm listening exercise, right? But you give me a reading exercise and I can understand it. And why does it happen? Well, we're gonna see it in a moment, but it has a connection with the history of English and why some words that we read in English, for example, if we see the word in the cartoon that says sufficient, I bet that if you read that word as a Spanish speaker, you will understand it, right? Because it's related to our language. But then when a person pronounces it, then it's the difficulty. No, the difficulty is there. So sufficient. So then you're gonna be like, wow. But if you see the word is different, for example, if you have the word second, right? So you read the word and you understand it. If you have the word language or instruction or district or percent, so you see there are many words that are related to our language, and that's why sometimes we say like, yes, I can read in English. There is no problem. I can read in English and no problem. But don't ask me to speak. Don't ask me to listen. Don't ask me to write. All right, and that's why this is like important to practice, and we're gonna see some of the strategies. Some, I know that you're mentioning another ones, for example, paraphrasing, using vocabulary in context. We're gonna see it in a moment, and I'm sure that you have many strategies that you use when teaching pronunciation. When teaching vocabulary. Here we're gonna see one of the most common and how these can be adapted to the word lists that we're sharing with you on the third district spelling bee documents, as well as how these can be integrated with your lessons and how you can implement this, knowing that we are facing a health emergency these days and we are not having face-to-face classes with our students. All right, so what is the first strategy that we're going to see? Well, one of the most common ways that we can teach vocabulary to our students is grouping. No, and when teaching grouping, what can we do? You have your lesson. The objective of your lesson is to, let's say, talk about shopping. So when you're introducing or having that input of vocabulary to your students, what can you do? You can bring some words, and then you can create different categories for those words, and then you can start your students to place those words according to the category they belong to. All right. So, for example, if you have the word list for high school A category, and here you have an example. If you have three groups like nouns, adjectives, and verbs, then you can have the word currency and Melbourne as part of the nouns, interesting and good looking for adjectives, and go to sleep and place these words as verbs. So what if we start telling your students for an activity like, okay, we're gonna have this word list. We're going to start practicing the pronunciation. We're going to learn the vocabulary, but to learn the vocabulary, you're going to start grouping those words according to these categories. So you can create any category. You can say, for example, expressions in English, and then you can use, for example, categories like according to the numbers of the letters, as you can see, or you can create categories based on the topics that you're teaching. Yes, so the sounds, if you're teaching pronunciation, you can create groups or similar sounds groups, and then students will start understanding and seeing that this is not just memorizing a list of words, but then like it's going to be like a more cognitive process for them. All right, so remember, grouping is one of the strategies that can be used. Our invitation for you is to start using this strategy with your students. We know that now we don't have face-to-face classes, but you can ask your students to do this as part of the activities that you're assigning to them. Remember that these word lists are for example, in the case of high school A, most of the words come from the way to go series of books that most of you have in your schools, or most of you have seen, or that you can find on Colombia Aprende from the Ministry of Education webpage. So, well, our invitation is for you to start using these strategies. Grouping is one of them. All right, we're gonna move into a new strategy, or another strategy that can be implemented, and this is related to what I was mentioning before, that is using cognates and using false cognates. Okay, sometimes, and as I was telling you before, students say, no, but teacher, there are many words in English that are familiar to the way that we write them in Spanish as well. So what about teaching them cognates or false cognates, right? What about taking some words from the word lists that are cognates or false cognates for them, and then they start analyzing this vocabulary, and then they start seeing how different the meaning is in the false cognates, and how different the pronunciation of the words in English and Spanish cognates is. Yes, so for example, here you have a list of cognates, right? You have the word central, and in Spanish we have the word central, right? Which is like very similar, and the meaning is similar as well. Chocolate. So in that case, students say chocolate, and in Spanish we say chocolate. So if the students see this word, they will understand it. Yes. Sometimes the students say like, no, English is so difficult, but look at the high amount of words that are related to Spanish, and that's why. And I'm going to go back to the video that we want you to watch, and this is because in the video this is explained, no? So we have chocolate and chocolate. So in that case, how these words are similar in two languages. So it's because the root of both languages is the same. So we have the Indo-European, and then when chocolate was discovered, it became the same word in different languages, in most of the languages. And then the writing is almost the same, but the pronunciation is the one that changes. So this is something that you can start teaching your students as well. The case of digital, error, essential, esencial, global, right? Illegal, ilegal, right? And then you can start playing with this. You can start having your students realize how different the pronunciation is, right? So this is like another important aspect that you can mention. Okay, what about false cognates? Sometimes you see words that look very similar, but they have very different meaning, no? So, sorry, if a person that is learning English sees the word pie, but it's like pie, so the person might say like, pie is the same in English and in Spanish, and then can get confused, no? Or the word, or when you say, it happens, no? In Colombia, especially, we're very creative, inventing new words, no? So if you don't know the word, you invent it. So if you don't know how to say ropa in English, you say rope. Yes, that could be like the most common thing that people usually do when learning English. But then students will realize when you're teaching them false cognates that rope has a very different meaning from ropa in Spanish. The same happens with soap, or with large, or with exit, no? And this is very common. People say like, no, this is a person that has a lot of exit, or this person is very exit. And then you say like, okay, when you see this word for the first time, it looks pretty similar to the meaning that we have in Spanish, that you say éxito is very similar to writing, right? But then the meaning is totally different, all right? In English, this word means salir or salida, right? Exit. So this is another strategy that you can use. What about for example, having all the words or some of the words that you have in the lists, and then ask your students to look for the meaning, for the pronunciation, if they are cognates or false cognates. That's another strategy that you can use. And also to have them realize, as I was saying before, about how easy could be to learn a lot of words in English if we learn the cognates, okay? For the cognates, right? Good. So our invitation is for you to do that. Another strategy. So we have given definitions, or like what's the meaning of these words, and as I was and as we said before, remember that the important thing here is to contextualize this vocabulary, because sometimes if they learn the words only like by memory, because it's a competition and because I need to memorize this and I have to say it fast, then the learning process is not going to be that meaningful for them. So our invitation, what about having definitions, activities, or giving examples, activities, and this is a way in which they will remember or memorize the vocabulary, but they are going to use it in a real context, or they are going to use it in a more meaningful way. Them expressions in English, and they're going to be more confident when asking a person in a real definition of a word. If they're having a conversation, is what does refer to, what is the meaning of, what does mean, can you define, can you give a definition for, how can we define, for example, when they give the
Buenos días, profes. Estamos experimentando un tema con la conectividad del equipo de Diego. Le vamos a dar, por favor, 2 minuticos mientras se restablece. No se vayan a salir del... Les pedimos...
these expressions, and why not having this kind of activity, like students start writing a definition and then giving their own definition and using the word in a sentence, and then they can start interacting with their partners and using this give me a second, I think that we have a problem with the... Give me a second, don't worry. Should I share my PowerPoint again?
Hola, okay. Diego.
Hey, Diego. Ah, okay.
Tuvimos
Don't worry.
tuvimos un inconveniente con la conectividad, pero ya retomamos. Puedes iniciar de nuevo.
Okay, give me a second and then I will come back to you. Okay, thank you very much. Okay, people. So as I was saying before, so this is another strategy that you can use, like using meanings, teaching them how to give definitions, teaching them how to ask for definitions. And this can become like a communicative activity, all right? So our invitation is for you to use those word lists as part of this, all right? Okay, good. Next, our next strategy, and I think this is one of the most common ones because I bet all of us have used uh, flashcards once in our lessons, or we were taught by a teacher using flashcards. This is like very common, no, using visuals, and now we have more like technological tools that we can use to use visuals, videos, we can use PowerPoint, we can use many different apps that can help us when teaching vocabulary uh, through visual aids, all right? So what about, for example, having students creating their own visual aids? These days that they are at home, and they don't have internet connection, you can give them a group of words from the word lists or from the words that you are using in your lesson or according to the context of what you're teaching them, and then you start telling them like, okay, let's, for those little kids, like, okay, you're going to use the word, you're going to draw a picture, and then you're going to send me a video pronouncing the word, or you're going to create a wall on your room, in the room, and then you will like start creating or drawing pictures, and you're gonna be visualizing them every day. So this is like a way in which you can use visuals and I think that this is what we have done for many years, right? Using visuals is a very nice tool because you know that the multiple intelligences and everything, and most of us are very visual. If we see things, we learn them faster, all right? Or in a fast way. But what about using visuals in a fun way? What about, for example, telling our students to play Pictionary with their families at home these days? What about telling them to create or having them creating uh, cards with vocabulary and then playing with their families or with their brothers or sisters or if they live with their cousins. So what about doing this exercise so that they can learn in a fun way? I'm sure that some of you or most of you have used Pictionary in your lessons, and this is like a nice way as well to teach them expressions in English. Yes, because it's not only playing Pictionary but also communicating in English when playing a game, right? So they can learn commands, they can learn different vocabulary related to the game. So, for example, if they are playing Pictionary, you can teach them like it's my turn or you're next or guess the word or for example what you see on the screen. So guess what? Or it's up, and then they have to complete, or you can start modeling expressions to them to so that they communicate in English while playing. All right. For example, when the kid says, "No, it's a Christmas card." No, it's a Christmas card. You're bad at Pictionary. All right. So in that case, it's a way in which you can also introduce expressions in English. All right. So don't forget that the most important thing here is to contextualize, to give them a context, but also to have them use that vocabulary learned in a real context, in a real situation. All right. Next, well, as I was mentioning before, we have a lot of games that can be found online. For example, we have memory games, we have quizzes, we have games in which, for example, visuals are used. What about sometimes? Well, if we have students that have internet connection at home, we can assign them or we can share with them those links. But what about using the information that we find there to other purposes? What about if we ask them to create their own games at home? What about asking them to create their own memory game with cards that have pictures and the words, and then they start playing with their families or with their siblings, and that's a way in which we can we know that students, most of the students don't have internet connection, but it doesn't mean that we cannot use this material to 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 have our students learn in a fun way at home. All right. So our invitation is for you to use these strategies, to use these websites as ideas as well. Yes. So explore them and then say like, okay, what can I do for my lesson if students don't have internet connection? How can I ask them to create their own material? All right. So this is a very nice web page, eslgamesplus.com. So you will find a lot of ideas and material in there. Good. Then we have some strategies and to learn vocabulary and expressions. We have learned them, and one of the best ones to practice expressions in English and the vocabulary learned in a class is role plays. No, and sometimes we say, and sometimes when we're teaching very basic levels, and I know that this is tough, especially at public schools when we have true beginners that we say like, no, but how am I going to have my students speak in English? They are not going to be able to speak in English. And sometimes you find teachers that think this way, that say like, no, my students don't speak in English. I cannot have them speak in English. How can I do it? It's going to be very time consuming. Look, role plays. Role plays is like the easiest way to start using conversation models, to start sharing with them expressions in English that can be used in real contexts. And it means that students are going to feel more confident when speaking in English, because they are going to be like, okay, so I this is the context where we're buying clothes, then we have to buy. One person is the client, one person is the customer, and then these are the most common sentences and phrases used in this context. So why not using some of the expressions that you have in the word lists of the third district spelling bee to create some of these role plays? What about integrating the topic that you're teaching them, like the communicative context, with the vocabulary that you have in the word lists? So you can say like, okay, I'm teaching them how to buy clothes, so I'm going to use this vocabulary from the word lists, and then I'm going to create this conversation for them, and you can show them a conversation, and then you can ask them to change information in the conversation, and the students will start introducing the vocabulary that they have learned. So this is another way in which students can use expressions in English. For example, can I help you? Or I'm looking for, or can I try this on? Or how much is it? So then you're promoting that students learn expressions in English that are commonly used in real situations, and then they're going to feel more confident when using the vocabulary and the expressions that you're teaching them. Okay, so well, we have someone is talking about useful free websites. The website that I'm sharing with you, this one that that says that its name is ESLGamesPlus.com. It's for free. The only thing is that you need to use Acrobat for playing the games. Yes, to play the games, but in this case, it's possible too. All right, and they are for free. Okay, so role plays. Don't forget, this is a very useful strategy as well. Okay, people. So today we have something different for you, and I know that well we're taking a little bit longer, but I think this is really important, and this is like the way that you can implement way to go, and how you can create or the role plays based on the information that you find. Here you have an example. So remember that in the Way to Go book, you have a speaking section, and then, for example, here you have what are the negative effects of spending too much time on the internet. So in this case, you can create a role play based on this information, and then here you have something that says useful expressions, and then you can teach them to use these useful expressions, and students create their own conversations. All right, so this is like very useful for those who are using Way to Go for 6th, 7th, and 8th grades. For those who haven't started using it, why not start implementing this material as part of your lessons, especially these days that probably looking for material on the internet or maybe creating material is going to be very time consuming. Well, we have the material there in Way to Go, so why not doing it? All right, and well, as I was saying, these are some of the strategies that we wanted to share with you today. Uh, Sorry if I'm taking a little bit longer, but I think this were really meaningful. Remember to share with us the strategies that you use on your daily teaching practice. So if you have ideas, don't forget to share them with us. We can take it and include it in the bank of resources that we have created for the spelling bee. So if you have interesting activities, motivating activities, fun activities that you want to start implementing, please let us know. Also remember that there is like a strategy on Red Académica entre profes in which you can also share those meaningful activities, your hard work. We know that you are making or that you're working really hard these days, because teaching virtual classes is not easy at all, and we have to create more material. We have to be planning most of the time. It's really exhausting after teaching a lesson online. So we are inviting you to share with us that material. Okay, so don't forget that you can share the material to our email addresses. Don't forget that you can share the material with us, and then we let Red Académica know about it to see if it's worth to be shown on Red Académica, and also to be part of the bank of resources that we're using. All right, people, to finish today, we wanted to have a teacher that is going to share with us the information about like all the ideas and activities that she has created to teach her students through virtual activities and teaching vocabulary and expressions in English as well. All right, so I'm going to give we're going to have teacher Norma. So teacher, are you there? Can you listen to me?
Okay, we'll try.
Okay, so thank you very much, teacher, for joining us today. Teacher Norma belongs to Rafael Delgado Salguero School, and well, we wanted to talk to you today because we want you to let us know about what you have been doing, and also to motivate other teachers to start implementing these activities and these practices. So, teacher, how did you start, like, using this different material, and what is exactly what you do? We know that you started creating these activities on as a consequence of the emergency that we're facing. So let us know about what you're doing.
Okay. Good morning. My name is Norma Liliana. I am school English teacher at Propaganda 18. This year I am working with kindergarten and transition students. When we had to leave classroom from home because I protect ourselves from the COVID-19, I did my strategy to motivate my students and continue English language. So for us, that let me record flash for my students and family. That I start to use TikTok because
teacher, sorry for the interruption, but people are saying that they cannot listen to you well. So maybe what if you don't use the camera but only the audio? Sorry for the interruption, but it's like not clear. The sound is not clear. So can you please only use the microphone? Stop using the camera, because maybe for internet connection reasons the sound is not. Can you try stop the camera and only use the microphone to see if it works better?
Okay, one. This?
Yes. Thank you.
Profe, y yo también creo que lo que pasa es que estás escuchando la transmisión en Facebook, entonces tenemos ahí como un retorno de tu audio. Entonces, que por favor apagues la transmisión por Facebook y únicamente hablemos acá por Teams.
Okay. Okay.
I think it's better now. So
yes.
Can you start from the beginning? Sorry, teacher, but I think that people couldn't understood what you were saying from the very beginning.
Okay. Okay. When we to leave classroom from because we had protect ourselves from COVID-19, I need to find strategy to motivate the students and continue the process. So, look it from social data that we or flagship videos for my students and their families. That's how I started to use TikTok, because it helped me to show subject to watch video in a way. I present the topic with us, and I speak vocabulary and some questions, and finally close communication. Students express vocabulary with their family through how we draft and sketch. No, we check to go file, play, and wrote.
Sorry, teacher, but I think that the sound is not working either this way. Are you using like earphones, or like are you using earphones or
Okay.
Because I'm sorry, but I think that the sound is broken, so it's cut. So we cannot listen like a complete sentence, but only like some words that you are using. So I don't know if maybe you try not getting that close to the computer, and maybe let's try again. I don't know, teacher, if you could like start again, letting us know.
Start again.
Let me see. Ready, teacher?
Okay. Yes? Better?
Yes, better.
Okay. Again, no?
No, teacher, the sound is not good. So
No.
let's see if we can fix the problem in a moment. But on the meantime, I'm going to explain what you wanted to say. All right?
Yes.
So we're also going to let people know that if you go to Red Académica, you will find in Entre Profes strategy, you will find a video of teacher Norma like explaining what she has done. Maybe Daniela, Luisa or Marta Galvis, could you help us like sharing the link on the comments so they can like see the place where they can, or the website or the link where they can find this information. All right. So sorry for the connection, but okay. Basically, what teacher Norma has done is that she's been like using different. And if we go back to the presentation, Jaime, I would really appreciate it. So if So if we go to the presentation again, well, what teacher Norma has done is that she has asked her students to um, to create videos based on the vocabulary and the contexts that she's been teaching. For example, for this preschool students that she has created some TikTok. She's using the TikTok um, application to learn vocabulary and expressions in English. So these videos are going to you can also be found on Red Académica. So here we're gonna show you like an example. So, okay, so for example, in this case, students are learning how to the parts of the day, and they're also learning like expressions to greet and to farewell in English. All right. In this case, what teacher wanted to tell us as well is that sometimes when we are facing like an emergency, like the one or the situation that we are facing now, that we hadn't faced this situation before, we say like, no, but what are we going to do? And sometimes we say like, no, but we don't have material, we don't have technology, students cannot use this, the students don't have internet connection. But it doesn't mean that we cannot explore different things. And as teacher was saying here, no fear, no limits, no excuses. So you can start like, we know that this is difficult, we know that this is going to be more time consuming, but you can like start like using all the best strategies that you know as English teachers. All right. And this is going to be like a way in which students are going to be like more familiar with technological tools. For example, in the case of these little kids that they're using TikTok, and a student last session was saying like, no, we don't. TikTok is only used for stupid videos. Yes, but it depends on the way that we use TikTok. And here you have an example of how TikTok can be used in a meaningful way, and students can realize that this can also be an app for learning purposes. All right, so this is another way. Here you have a link. We're going to share this link with you as well. You can contact teacher Norma to this email address, that is nlpinto@educacionbogota.edu.com. All right, so if you want to ask her about processes, about how this has been carried out, remember that you can also find these videos on YouTube. We can also share with you these videos. And remember, you can find them on Red Academica. But basically, what we want to start doing, and maybe for next time, we're going to try to fix the problems and have teacher Norma be with us again on Tuesday next week, so that she can speak more about what this activity has been about. We are going to conclude by reminding you important things. The third district spelling bee word list for each category correspond to the following to the following levels according to the Common European Framework. Remember, primary A1 level. In this case, we have high school A, A2 level. We have high school B, B1 level. So remember that all the material that you use, all the role plays, all the strategies that you use, please have them, in this case, connected to the topics that you're teaching, but don't forget that they correspond to these levels of English according to the Common European Framework of Reference. Remember, this vocabulary was taken from the CSI from preschool and primary, as well as for secondary school. So remember, people, all this is connected to the English suggested curriculums that we have been promoting, that the Ministry of Education has been promoting, that the Secretary of Education has as its core for the transformation of the pedagogical teaching in the classroom. All right, and on all the proposals that we have for you. So don't forget that all these lists are connected to what you're teaching as well. For those who are implemented the English suggested curriculum. And don't forget the vocabulary should be given in a contextualized environment based on the topics you're covering in your class. So don't forget to give them communicative purposes. Don't forget to give them like a communication context every time that you are teaching them vocabulary or you're having vocabulary input. So that being said, teachers, thank you very much for your time. Sorry that we extended a little bit longer today, but well, with technical problems and etc. But our invitation for you is to keep sharing with us your ideas. We're going to try to have more teachers participating in our workshops, in the common workshops that we have. We're going to see each other again on Tuesday, 10 a.m. next week. And our topic is going to be conversation clubs. All right? So please don't forget to follow us next week on Tuesday to keep on practicing, to keep seeing different strategies in which the third district spelling bee is going to be or can be part of learn at home or Aprende en Casa strategy. So thank you very much. Teacher Norma, thank you very much for being with us today. I'm sorry that we had these technical problems. For next class, for next session, we're going to fix them. So thank you very much, and we expect you to be with us on Tuesday next week to share your ideas. Okay. Okay, people. So thank you very much for your attendance. Don't forget to go to Red Académica. Don't forget to follow the links that we're sharing with you. Thank you, Sandra Milena Ortiz Garzon. I really appreciate these videos. Your strategy has been so interesting. Thanks for a useful presentation. Thanks, good presentation, Isaina Angelica. Hector Castillo, thanks a lot, Diego, for your presentation. So thank you, Hector, for being with us. Angelica Rodriguez, thank you for being with us today. Sandra Milena, Numia Mendez, Azucena as well, Laura. We have Giselle, Norma. Thank you, Norma. Sorry for the inconvenience. Nubia, is there another training? Yes, we will be having another training on conversation clubs. How to create a conversation club with your students. All right. So see you, people. Bye bye. Thank you for being with us again. See you next week on Tuesday. Don't forget, 10 a.m. Bye bye.